Thank you very much, Ms. Lindbergh. I want to ask a question of Ambassador Ford, and it goes to the Director of National Intelligence comments here to Congress quite recently. He said, an increasingly beleaguered Syrian regime might be prepared to use chemical weapons against the Syrian people. I'd note that, many of us doubt that the Syrian government would risk triggering foreign interference by deploying chemical weapons, but there are reports yesterday of chemical weapons use, as you have seen. And I was going to ask you, Ambassador, what could you tell us on that?
Mr. Chairman, so far we have no evidence to substantiate the reports that chemical weapons were used yesterday. But I want to underline that we are looking very carefully at these reports. We are consulting with partners in the region and in the international community. More broadly, we have been very clear from the beginning about our concern that as the Assad regime's military situation deteriorates, and it becomes, as the Director of National Intelligence said, it becomes ever more beleaguered, that it might be tempted to use chemical weapons. And the President has been very clear in saying that if Assad and those under his command make the mistake of using chemical weapons, or if they fail to meet their obligation to secure them, then there will be consequences and they will be held accountable.
What would those consequences be, Ambassador?
Mr. Chairman, in a hearing like this, I absolutely do not want to go into hypotheticals. I do want to underline that we take these reports and these possibilities very seriously, and we are using all of our available means to determine exactly what has happened.
Let me raise another point, and that is to the transfer of weapons going through Iraq, either over airspace or by land into Syria. Last week we had a report in Reuters that the Iranian regime was increasing its assistance to the Assad regime, and clearly the observation has been that this is the lifeline. It's not just the foreign fighters, but it's also the munitions that are being flown in. And it's being utilized through civilian aircraft. Personnel are flying in, by the way, through airspace as well as the weapons. So we see that, and we see at the same time Hezbollah on the ground now in Syria. This has been raised, as I understand it, several times with the government in Iraq. But still, the government there is ramping this up. If we really grasped the strategic opportunity here, it seems like one of the easiest things we could do would be to lean on the Iraqis and get this process halted. So I was going to ask, how hard has the administration weighed in with the Iraqis? What has been tried to get them to cease and desist? And how might Congress help make this job a little clearer and easier for the administration, if that's what's necessary here?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that. A couple of things I'd like to note. First, the Iranian relationship to the Bashar al-Assad regime is not new, but as you noted, their assistance to the regime now in this conflict has grown substantially. I could just cite, for example, that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps lost a general in Syria. And they have lost other personnel as well. And of course, I don't want to fail to mention that Lebanese Hezbollah is also playing a very pernicious role, and there are Shia extremists going to places like the Sayyidah Zainab neighborhood of Damascus, and even up to Homs. So this is a serious problem, and it is absolutely prolonging the conflict. We have raised on multiple occasions with Iraqi officials, and I have done so myself when I visited Baghdad at the end of last year. We had a senior Iraqi official here in Washington very recently, 2 weeks ago, and we raise it during visits here in Washington and as well out in Baghdad, and we will keep pressing the Iraqis. We want the Iraqi government to understand that it has no interest in having an extremist government in Syria, and the longer the conflict continues, the greater the influence of extremists on the ground. And so Iraq should be working with us to get to that negotiated settlement that I talked about.
You know, it seems to me that with our capacity to put pressure on other governments with respect to trying to bring change in Syria, we are certainly missing an opportunity here, given that the flow of these fighters are over Iraqi territory and they are not assisting. We're missing the opportunity in terms of a direct conversation about the security assistance we've provided and the means whereby we could frankly force Iraq to at least be part of the solution rather than part of the problem here. And again, can you think of anything definitive that has been shared with the Iraqis on that front?
Mr. Chairman, let me assure you we have had very direct conversations with the Iraqis. I myself have. Our ambassador in Baghdad, Stephen Beecroft, has, and officials here in Washington, the White House and at the State Department. As I mentioned, we had a senior official here from Baghdad the week before last, and we have been very direct with them about the importance of not allowing Iran to exploit the crisis in Syria, and how that is not helpful to Iraqi interests as well as the region's interests.
Thank you. Mr. Deutsch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just follow up on this line of questions.